Oh shit, that's back where you were. Shh. What the fuck is that? Kevin, turn around. Get the fuck out of here. Please turn around. No, hold on. I'm scared. Is that someone being killed? I'm really scared. Please turn around.
All right, let's talk about that night.
Not even 3 seconds later after you did that, we hear this, like, the same rhythmic beat of the thudding, but, like, it sounded like someone was beating their chest. The exact sensation I felt in the woods that day.
Bigfoot Bytes.
Whenever I talk about the events of that night, my heart just starts pounding.
Please God keep us safe, please God keep us safe, please God keep us safe.
All of these feelings start racing back into my heart because it truly was the most terrifying experience of my life.
Oh, it sounds like it's up in the hills.
I'm really scared.
I told you this road's EVGB hill.
Thank you for turning around. That was a human screaming. That would sound like a human screaming bloody murder, and I felt like I heard pounding or maybe like beating or something. Did you hear that?
Someone probably went missing this weekend. It's a fucking Yeti plucking them right out.
So let me back up and start from the beginning. That day. Our first day at Mount Rainier. I can't even believe the odds of that and the sheer astronomical coincidence that our first day researching Mount Rainier, we had this incredible encounter with not one, but multiple Sasquatch. I mean, what are the odds of that? Obviously, that's a researcher's dream, right? But it wasn't without effort. So we had arrived at Mount Rainier earlier in the day, and we were driving all around the area, all around the park, and just trying to make our way around the entire mountain. And along the way, we stopped off at certain trails or certain pull-offs, and we would go explore. And Kevin had his new drone. So he would pick an area right on the edge of the road where he would set stuff up with the drone, and he would fly the drone over me while I would go down and do some tracking in the riverbeds or off on the trails. And it was kind of nice. I felt like I had eyes on me, you know, and it was still daytime, so I felt safe kind of venturing off on my own for a little bit. And that was where I found the baby Bigfoot print, was in that dried up rocky riverbed. And the reason why I thought it was a Sasquatch baby footprint and not a human baby footprint was just the sheer area. I mean, there's no sane parent on earth who's going to bring their toddler down into this dry, rocky riverbed that's just completely treacherous and full of jagged rocks, and it's not stable footing, and let their baby just run around barefoot. I mean, there wasn't even an area that would be fun to run around barefoot. If I were barefoot, it would be a nightmare. You're just stepping on rocks everywhere. So it just didn't make sense. It was so out of place to see a baby footprint in this area. And also, the impression was quite deep. In the photo, you can see it looked somewhat heavy and evenly pressed, and maybe even a break in the middle. It's tough to tell, but I will say that being a nanny and working with kids for many years, I would never bring a toddler to that area. So I'm totally out there in my groove, tracking, getting photos of this baby Bigfoot print, and really just trying to get out there in the field and get my, boots on the ground. And I was just whooping everywhere I went. I was trying to make sure I covered all my bases. I was trying to make sure that, if we're going to drive this whole mountain, and let's say in the beginning of the way there's no Sasquatch for the first 5 miles, then I was going to make sure that in the next 5 miles, if there was a Sasquatch, they heard me. So every mile, every quarter mile, I was doing whoops. You know, not only were we tracking, but I was really making a lot of calls and trying to garner a response. A huge part of going out there and doing wildlife photography, or like what Jane Goodall did, is you go out there and you immerse yourself in their territory and their behavior, and you imitate their behaviors. You imitate the sounds they make. You show them that, you know, you're able to be like them, sound like them, act like them. That's the type of research that I'm doing, because I feel after having so many encounters, that's what gets them to respond. Because I'm new at this and I'm testing out new theories and new methods and new tactics, I have to admit that some of them may be extremely dangerous, because the screams that we heard sounded like something was in agony and was being killed. Okay, so let me just pause, because my heart's pounding again, just even thinking about it, and let me just do a quick recap here. So we've been driving around this entire mountain all day long. I've been hanging out the window, whooping out the window at the top of my lungs all over this mountain for like 8 hours straight. We're going off on side roads, we find a tree structure, jackpot. We go into the riverbed, we find a baby Bigfoot print, jackpot. We're thinking this is a researcher's dream. We're having a hell of a day. It's just amazing. It's gorgeous out. You know, it's a beautiful summer day, Mount Rainier. Wonderful. But we'd been driving all day long, and it was about 11 p.m. So we were like, okay, we need to call it a night. Let's just go down this dirt road. It was the dirt road that we went down in the beginning of the day. Let's just go down this dirt road one last time, listen for a little bit, and if nothing happens, we'll call it a night. And we barely had arrived. We'd barely even pulled in and stopped the car and turned off the engine, and that's when it happened. It starts off as this intense, boisterous, enormous sounding growl. Over and over and over in a repeated fashion that is not normal for anything that you would regularly hear in the forest. And as someone who's grown up in the mountains for over 30 years and has been deeply immersed in nature, grew up on 23 acres, I know every sound that the animals make out here in the wilderness. And so I feel I'm qualified to tell you that those sounds were not normal forest sounds. And so boom, I hit record. And you can hear that there's this repetitive growl going on in the beginning. And I've mentioned it everywhere online, but I'll say it again, and I'll probably say it a million times. The audio in the video that I took from my cell phone does no justice. Our human ears are incredible. There's no piece of technology that's ever going to accurately and, as perfectly imitate what our human ears can hear. Our ears are incredible. You know, if they're functioning properly, you can hear a lot of stuff from a long ways away, and it's clear and it's loud and it's intense. And so what you're hearing in the recording that I got is like 1/10 of the actual volume that we heard with our human ears. So we're hearing this intense growling that just in my mind's eye, because it's pitch black and I really can't see anything. So I just think back on the memory and I just think like pitch black, and it's just in my mind thinking this is a monster. It sounded like a bear that was a massive 20-foot tall bear. It just didn't sound real. And then the thing that really set off my fight or flight and triggered me into like a full body response of the most visceral, intense fear I've ever felt in my life. And side note, I've been false charged by a bear before in Tahoe, so I've had a close proximity experience with like a massive animal coming at me, and even that didn't compare to the response that my body got when the screaming happened. It was the screaming that made me utterly terrified because I couldn't process what we were hearing. I didn't know if we were hearing someone being attacked and eaten alive. Now, in this video, in the audio, you can hear that it doesn't sound human. It sounds very animalistic. But in the moment, the screams of agony, and in reality, because again, we heard it so much more clearly with our human ears, but it sounded faintly like a man screaming. That's the part that really terrified me, and I think what sent me into such shock, because I was worried we were hearing a man dying. But when I listen back on the recording, it's very obvious that that was not human, and Kevin knew right away. I mean, you can hear in Kevin's voice that he recognizes immediately, oh, that's Sasquatch. That's not a human. I mean, it could be mistaken for a human, but it was just too loud and too intense and too animalistic. And in the video, you can hear Kevin saying, oh, that's right where we just were.
Oh shit, that's back where we were.
Because the sounds were coming from an area that we had just been hanging out in. And that was when my mind started racing, because I was like, oh my God, did the Sasquatch think that I was another Sasquatch encroaching on their territory? And did I create a territorial dispute? Because let's say there were two separate troops of Sasquatch living on this mountain, and they had already established their own territory, because it's a massive mountain. They can certainly keep to their own. But what if they had already had some type of confrontation and established dominance in an area, and I had made similar sounds to something that was like a war cry or something that was aggressive, accidentally creating this problem between the two packs or between the two troops, because it sounded like they were fighting. It didn't sound like Sasquatch were just whooping at us or like Sasquatch were doing some sort of vocal display. It sounded like they were fighting. Because we heard the repetitive growling. Then all of a sudden we hear intense screaming like something is just being murdered. And the thing was, in my mind, I couldn't understand what I was hearing, so I assumed I was hearing a human screaming. That's why I was so terrified, because I thought, oh my God, are these Sasquatch murdering some innocent camper in that area we were just at? Because that road we were at, there were actually a few people camping there, because there's this hiking trail that goes way back in the backwoods. So, their cars were parked there, and I thought, oh my God, did the Sasquatch just come and attack a camper? But Kevin knew. I was just in shock, but Kevin knew immediately those screams were not human. They were far too loud and guttural and bizarre and sounded like a grown man, but also sounded animalistic at the same time, and were just far too insane to be human. Plus, the sheer volume at which it was screaming was just absolutely not human. Then the other Sasquatch, and I don't know if there were 3 or 4, but there were definitely 3, because there's the one doing the repetitive crazy growling, monster giant bear sounding growling. There's the one that's screaming bloody murder. And you know what else is crazy too that I should mention? I studied opera for a very long time. I got a scholarship for opera. I know all about vocal training, shapes of the mouth to make certain sounds, and this screaming we were hearing was an extremely wide-mouthed screaming. It was like ear-to-ear, wide-mouthed screaming, and I know this sounds crazy, but it almost sounded like I could hear like buck teeth. You know how Freddie Mercury, when, in his band Queen, right? You can almost hear his buck teeth. I could hear that. So anyhow, we've got the crazy buck teeth, wide mouth screamer. We've got the growler. But the third one that came in was the one that was rattling and shaking its head around violently. Almost sounded like when a dog has a chew toy, or a dog's like rattling something around in its mouth, and it's kind of like, just rattling it all around. So, I mean, it just didn't make sense that would be some kind of territorial thing. It actually sounded like they were just fighting, and like the one screaming was just like being killed. It was insane, and my brain could not process it. I mean, I absolutely almost fainted. I had a full body response. My heart is beating now, fast, even just talking about it. Now, there are a lot of people that have theorized that Sasquatch can emit some type of infrasound that can actually paralyze people and put their body into a state of shock, like the state I was in that current moment. But, as much as I understand that theory, and as much as I could totally wrap my head around it, I just personally don't think that's what happened in my case. Could that be what's happening in other situations? Sure, I'm totally open to that. Very open-minded in this field. But I think in my case, it was just my fight or flight. And I could feel it throughout my body. It was just a sheer rush of adrenaline. First, it was shock and disbelief, and then extreme adrenaline. And my instinct was, we need to get out of here right now. Because I totally did think that my life was in danger. My body was having a totally, justified response to wanting to escape imminent death and terror and destruction. So, personally, I don't think I was blasted with any type of, infrasound or anything like that. I think I just had a reaction to my fear, an extreme reaction to my fear. And I could kind of go into detail about what I think is going on there with the human brain and that type of response. I'll try to make it succinct as possible here, but essentially what I think is going on is our human brains are incredible at cataloging and categorizing different sounds and being able to recognize them easily. Studies have shown that we can hear just a millisecond of a clip and be able to identify what it is. But when the human brain is having an instance where it has zero frame of reference or zero cataloging of any kind in your memory of these types of sounds, that's when the brain kind of goes a little haywire and sets off this fight or flight, because that's like the warning saying, we've never heard anything like this before. This is not normal. This is a red flag. Because even though before this encounter with Kevin at Mount Rainier, I'd had 2 other close proximity Sasquatch encounters before, but those sounds were more familiar to me, because the first one was a whoop, and it just reminded me of like a monkey at a zoo. So that's kind of what my brain correlated. And it was scary because it was super loud and boisterous. But again, it was like familiar. It sounded ape-like. And in the other instance, with my friend Katie, we had the Sasquatch pound the ground at us and beat its chest at us. Again, familiar sounds. I know what earth shaking beneath my feet and pounding into the ground sounds like. And I know what fist on flesh sounds like. So in those 2 previous encounters, I was scared, and definitely in the moment, like, it was a very intense moment, but it was not nearly as terrifying as this night at Mount Rainier, because again, I had just never in my wildest dreams, not even in the movies, not even in horror movies or crazy action movies or just any type of sound, I had never heard anything like that before, ever. And I guess I don't really have to justify my response of fear and terror, because many people would have that response. You're out in the middle of the forest, pitch black, and you hear the craziest growling, screaming, and snarling ever, like sounds like monsters in the woods. Yeah, many people would get scared. So you know what? Although I'm mad that I couldn't keep my cool and I'm upset now, you know, hindsight's 2020. And in the moment, I just wanted to stay safe. I just wanted to be able to live to tell the story. So yes, I'm bummed I wasn't able to stay longer and get more recorded, because as we were driving away, they were still going off. They were still flipping out and screaming and growling as we were driving away, which doesn't pick up on audio because all you can hear is the tires crunching on the dirt road. So, you know, many regrets, but a justified response of fear. And big kudos to Kevin for keeping his cool. But I will say it was so funny because the next time we went out, we did have another experience and Kevin was so scared. Oh, I gotta call Kevin out. I was brave on the next one, but it turned out to be barred owls. So Kevin was scared of barred owls. So there you go. I'm throwing Kevin under the bus. He was scared of an owl. It was actually really funny. Neither of us really knew what a barred owl sounded like. So when we had these barred owls come up, there was, I think, 2 of them, and they made their sound at us. We thought it was a whoop. We thought we were being whooped at. And immediately Kevin's like, get us out of here right now. And I was the one who was like, no, we're going to stay. We're going to interact. I was totally all about like being brave on the next one because I had chickened out so hardcore on the last one. But I have to tease Kevin for that one because I just think the irony of that is hilarious, that when it came to massive beasts in the forest making the craziest, scariest sounds on earth, Kevin's cool as a cucumber. But 2 owls show up and Kevin's like, get me out of here now. So it just goes to show that different people are having different responses at different times. You can hypothetically say all day long, all you want, that, oh, if it happened to me, I'd get out and go after the Bigfoot and I'd square up with him, or I'd go, you know, track him down. You know, you can say that all you want, but you just never know how you're going to react in the moment. They are such intense, crazy moments that you just never know. One time you could handle it totally well. Another time you could be crying like a baby. You could be a grown man running full speed crying. You just never know. And also, I think there's a big part of us that use humor to cope with how scary the situation really is. When we talk about these stories, I tend to kind of crack some jokes and make jokes here and there to kind of like ease the intensity of it all. But in the moment, it's not funny. It's really scary. I think humor is just the way that we kind of ease the fear. There's a lot of fear that goes on in the Bigfoot world. So personally, when I use the humor in all of my stuff that I do, it's just a fun way to escape the fact that you're terrified constantly. And, you know, maybe there is something to be said about those of us who are going out and running this research. Maybe we are adrenaline junkies. Maybe we're addicted to the fear. Maybe we have these experiences that are so life-changing that we just, I don't know, something in us is this drive to keep going and keep pushing it, even though we recognize the danger and the fear and how bizarre and uncharted it all is. And I don't know where that comes from, but I know I was born with it. So I guess it makes sense that I became the Bigfoot lady. I've been blessed and I've been able to travel all over the world and do all kinds of incredible high adrenaline sports and, you know, jump off cliffs with a parachute and, you know, cliff dive and swim with sharks and all kinds of neat things like that. And I think in order to really get yourself into this line of research, it doesn't matter how brave you are. It doesn't matter what you've done. Nothing can prepare you for these encounters. So it's my pleasure to share them with you. I've had a lot of people ask me online about my encounters, and I've been really eager to share the unfolding of events that occurred. So thank you so much for being here with me to go through this, because, you know, if you have questions, I have questions. Let's learn together. I think there's so much room for learning more in this field of research, which I'm really excited for. I think it's important for me to express that night when we had that intense reaction, that insane encounter, I do not believe it was a coincidence. And I do believe that it was triggered in some way by what I was doing that day. And I think that we should take this into consideration, because if we have people constantly reporting Bigfoot encounters as being terrifying and these just crazy, guttural, agonizing screams in the forest, we should take into consideration what they mean and why they're happening. And if we as humans are encroaching on their habitat and their territory, and they are fiercely protective of it, we need to be aware of that. And I hate to bring this to a dark side of the tale, because I know there's already so much fear in the world of Sasquatch. They're giant, 9-foot tall, 1,000-pound beasts in the forest that could rip you limb from limb in a matter of seconds, right? It's already a scary world. But I just want people to understand that if we educate ourselves on their behaviors and we start documenting their behaviors and what triggered them, then we can remain safe. It's like that old rule, you don't poke the bear. If we can find out what's poking Sasquatch and what's making Sasquatch so upset that they're willing to throw boulders and rocks and entire trees, and they're willing to get extremely aggressive, it's our job together as the public to educate one another on how to stay safe. And I also firmly believe that signage should go up in certain areas to help warn people if there are aggressive Sasquatch encounters. When we go out into nature, we go there for an escape and to be immersed in a beautiful, peaceful environment. But the reality of the situation is there are wild animals and massive apex predators that live out there, such as bear and mountain lion. And if they get signage, and there are warnings everywhere to remind people how to handle those types of encounters, how to stay safe from them, what to do, who to call, when was the last cougar in the area spotted and where, what trails to avoid, how to keep your food stored properly so you don't attract a grizzly encounter. Things like this are just no-brainers now at this point, with us being, the hikers and campers and outdoorsy backpackers of the world. So with that being said, it's very important for us to move forward, remembering that by documenting certain encounters, by discussing certain behavioral patterns, we can know the do's and don'ts of Sasquatch territory. So moving forward, I hope that some of my stories can help bring light to those types of situations of how to handle things, because I have had 2 other close proximity encounters and I've lived to talk about it. So I think it's important to educate people on how to handle it, what to do and what not to do. So I appreciate everyone who reaches out to me with questions, and I don't always have all the answers, but I certainly think we can learn together. So I always welcome them. So there it is. Now you've heard the story of the Mount Rainier monsters, the massive Sasquatch that gave us a grand display. And after hundreds of hours out in the field, boots on the ground, running research, we finally yielded some results. This incredible recording that I'm so proud of. I'd like to thank absolutely everyone for all of their support, everyone that has made me feel comfortable enough to share my encounter stories without being ridiculed, and for people taking my work seriously. It's meant a lot to me, and I really hope that moving forward with the rest of these podcast episodes, I can help create more of an understanding around a world that is full of mystery. After having multiple personal encounters, I'm super excited to share more with you guys. Stay tuned for some of my undercover interviews with fish and wildlife and park rangers. I'm so excited for more on the next episode of Bigfoot Bytes.
Bigfoot.